What is homebrew? Why should you do it, and where do you start? What's up, everybody? I'm the D&D GC, and if you're looking to create your own campaign setting for your tabletop role-playing game, well, you're in the right place, because that's all we do here. So let's start from the top, right? What is homebrew, or a homebrew campaign setting? Well, it's anything that's not in any of the pre-published official D&D books, or any third-party adventures. See, anything that you come up with your own and didn't find online or in any of those materials, that's homebrew. Whether that be small tweaks to an existing rule or an entirely new mechanical system designed to implement something that wasn't in the game before. It can be magic items, weapons, races, classes, or an entire setting for your players to explore and interact with. Yeah, it can seem like a lot, and honestly, it is. But it's not as hard as you think. But if there's already that much source material out, why would anyone do this? Well, there's really only two reasons. The first is because even though all of that is a wealth of information, it's not everything. And there's probably at least one or two things that you want in your game that isn't there. The reality is, even using pre-written adventures, you're still going to be homebrewing to some degree. These books simply can't and aren't designed to anticipate everything you or your players could need. The second reason, in my opinion, is much more important, and that's because it's fun. It's incredibly rewarding. Running a pre-written adventure is great and can be great practice. Watching your players defeat the dragon of Icespire Peak or escape Barovia is awesome, but it can also sometimes feel like driving someone else's car. So, rule changes, mechanics, custom items, monsters, that's all a great place to start, and I'll cover all that eventually because I have a lot of work put into it. If you need any of that stuff right away, I suggest the coach. Seriously, he is fantastic, and if you have any questions about that, I promise he's already got a video on it. Today, we're going to focus on the narrative aspects and building a whole world. So now we know what a completely custom campaign can look like, and hopefully you've decided whether or not you want to do it. But that leads to the main question, where do you start? Now, every D&D creator in the YouTube space has made a video on world building, and it's a lot of fantastic, but generic and similar advice. It's all the advice I had starting, but we're going to get a little deeper. And I'm definitely going to tread on some of the same territory. That's why this is the first in a series of videos. It's going to take us from step one all the way to, hopefully, the end game. So, subscribe. Okay, so step one. Step one depends on where you are as far as getting your game together, because it depends on your players. Now, if you haven't set a group together or scheduled a time for a session 0, that's fine. You can skip this one for now, but really try and get your players involved. It's going to make things a lot easier. Now, session 0 is meant to cover a lot of ground, and I plan on making a full video on that as well. But again, we're going to focus on the information you need to start establishing your world. You and your players need to decide a few things. You need the genre of the game, the tone you're going for, and some stuff that's a little more specific. How prevalent is magic in this world? Is this going to be a dark, gritty, cutthroat place? Or are they going to be racing through the streets on the back of velociraptors while sky ships pass overhead? Is this Game of Thrones or Robin Hood Men in Tights? Or somewhere in the middle? Talk through what they think the game's going to look like and what they're looking for. Once you've taken all this in and you have a sense and a feeling for this place, encourage them to just start throwing stuff out there. Character backstories and motivations. This is seriously where you can pull massive amounts of inspiration and just sit back and watch as your players do a good amount of the work for you. If they decide their character is from a specific city and witness specific events, well, congratulations. You now have a city and histories to go along with it. Now, make sure your players know that every idea they have isn't going to make it into the game, or at the very least is going to need some minor adjustments. But try and take as much as they're willing to give. Okay, so step 2, and this is going to be the real solid, tangible piece of advice. Now, this is going to be the cornerstone of your world, the building block that you base everything else off of. And it's going to be plenty enough to get you through the first session or two. And that's this. Or this.
For within these rings was bound the strength and will to govern each race.
The text scroll, the narrated intro, the establishing shot of your world. If you can put this together, it's going to do everything you're trying to accomplish for the first couple sessions and be the most efficient way to spend your time. See, when you start playing, your players are low-level adventurers. They're not going to be speaking with kings or high wizards about the political intricacies of the world. They're not going to be researching the ancient histories of the cosmology. They're going to be sitting around introducing themselves, debating on whether or not to go help the farmer with his kobold infestation. See, they need to feel that the world around them exists, but don't need access into every aspect of it. having this prologue will give them this sense of a larger world around them, but also, and more importantly, especially for newer players, it tells them where they are. Remember, not everyone has played D&D, and even after session 0, they still might not know what to expect when they come to sit at the table. But everyone's seen Star Wars. Everyone has seen Lord of the Rings. Now, writing an opener to your game is in no way an original idea, but what I'm saying is to start there. Now, that sounds tough, and you might be asking, how do I summarize a whole world that doesn't exist? Well, it's simple. You just have to answer a couple questions. Now, I have several questions here, and if you can just give a brief summary to a majority of them, it's going to be all you need. So, let's get into it. So let's start with the questions that I feel are mandatory, ones you have to know before you start. Right, so question 1. What's the name of this world? Or does it have one? What's the name of this continent? And do the people that live on it know they're in a larger world? Do they know about other continents? Are they even aware they're on a planet? Are they on a planet? And all right, pause. Here's the best part of this method. You can take it as far as you want. Just keep answering the questions that will then spawn more questions, and keep answering those until you are short on time or bored. The simplest question, like what is this place called, will spin off into a million others. That's okay. Just keep answering them until you either get stuck or no longer interested. That's all world building is. Saying something is a certain way, asking why, and then using the answers to that why to ask more whys. Okay, so question 2, and you might have this one answered already from a session 0, and that's how prevalent is magic in this world? Now, this one's important specifically to your players. Are people going to freak out when your level 1 wizard casts Thaumaturgy in the tavern, or is that a pretty regular occurrence? If they get into trouble, is there a local cleric that knows Revivify, or are they kind of on their own? Question 3, who's in charge? Is this land ruled by a king? 2 warring factions stuck in eternal conflict? Is it 17 noble houses all controlling their own areas while claiming allegiance to some 12-year-old sociopath with an affinity for crossbows? If you know just the basics of who has all the power and why, you can use that to influence all the ways that this world functions. Okay, question 4. What does some of the topography look like? And I mean some. Are there frozen tundras to the north? A vast desert to the south? A famous mountain range running the center of the continent? Is everything sand? Is it all just sand? All right, question 5. What are 4 to 6 of the largest and most well-known cities? You don't have to get too deep here, just names and locations. Maybe 1 or 2 sentences with a broad description of what they're like. Is there one where all the holy and devout live and worship? Is there a famous trade city located on the coast filled with foreign and less seen races? Is there a forest that once inside completely blacks out the sun? Just names, general locations, north, east, south, and west, and 1 or 2 brief but interesting descriptors. That's all you need. Question 6. What's the major conflict going on right now, if there is one? Now, this can be as big or small as you want. You can come up with this and still not even tell your players if they wouldn't have reason to know about it yet. If there's a large war or invasion, that's something they'd be privy to. But if there's a sinister cult slowly uprising through the underbelly of this area, well, maybe 1 or 2 of them have hints at it, but you don't have to give away the full story. There doesn't have to be a major antagonist right up front, but you do need to seed a little bit of conflict this early on, even if your players never concern themselves with it. It at least gives the sense that this world has problems that are waiting to be solved by someone. Question 7, and now this is the last one I would consider mandatory, and that's really dependent on what kind of players you have in your party. That's the Pantheon. Now, this in its entirety can be as much work as the setting itself. So just focus on the absolute musts. You don't need a fleshed out creation story for your world. You don't need to know where all the gods are and how they got there, or who betrayed who in some ancient war. All you really need are the names and general principles of the gods that your players follow, as well as how popular that belief is across the world. Is your cleric going to be finding allies in most taverns they step into, or is she going to be hiding her holy symbol under her armor? Are any beliefs mandated by the ruling forces, or are any outlawed? And how do the different gods that your players believe in feel about each other? Will your paladin and warlock have reason to be weary of each other as soon as they meet? Or is it something that they can sweep under the rug? This is also a good time to bring up the fact that every aspect of your homebrew world doesn't have to come from you. Doesn't have to be original to your campaign setting. If developing some part of the world is necessary, but not necessarily interesting to you, steal it. Look, orcs and elves are in everything from Lord of the Rings to World of Warcraft, and no one's going to claim that you copied that if you make up your own world and include those races. It goes for everything. The first thing I do when I start a campaign is steal a pantheon, or several. Remember, everything is public domain when it comes to a home game. So those are the necessary ones. From there, answer as many other generic questions about the place as you can. Has there been a famous or tragic battle in the last 100 years? One notable enough to be talked about still. Are there any lasting effects from it? Are there any underground factions actively working against the established powers, and what are their motivations? How well known are they? Are there any famous or legendary monsters around? Rumors of an ancient white dragon that hunts over the barren tundra to the north? Or legends of a sea kraken that destroys trade ships as they approach the coast? All these questions will help breathe some life into the world around your players, as well as lay the foundation for plot hooks in the future. Now you take all this information and you write out a quick introductory to present to your players before you start the first session. If you're having trouble forming that into a concise, neatly packaged little monologue, well, watch Star Wars or Lord of the Rings. Watch the campaign intros to Critical Role or Dimension 20. You can literally steal their flow and play Mad Libs with the nouns and events. There's also great resources online for helping you with descriptors like describe.com. And now if you do all that, well, congrats. You now have a killer intro for a first session, and hopefully a world that your players can start to buy into and invest in. Now, all you need is a first session that your players can actually, play in. That's next week. All right, thanks so much for watching. I hope it helped. I've been working on launching this channel for a while, so it'd be really helpful if you could like, subscribe, comment, all of the YouTube things. We are just getting started, and I have so many more tips, tricks, and techniques that I've come up with over the last 5 to 7 years of doing this. So, all right, thanks again. Let's get to work.